Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures at Outperform. I'm Frank Wander and I'm here with my co-host Terri Mays. Today we're going to be covering the true cost of turnover. Most people don't know how to actually calculate the true cost of turnover. It is much higher. We're going to go through all the elements that contribute to the cost of turnover. That's episode 1. And then in episode 2, we're going to go through a few real examples. Data we've collected working with clients. We're not going to reveal who the clients are, but we'll look at a sales position, we'll look at an IT position, and we'll go through those numbers and we'll see how much turnover actually costs per person. And it varies by role. But, hi, I'm Frank Warner. I'm the founder of PeopleProductive. We help clients become organizations that outperform without burning people out. What a wonderful thing. Ter?
Yes. Hello and Happy New Year. I think this is our first episode of the new year.
It is, yeah.
So we've been doing a rerun of the Belonging series. Hopefully you've been enjoying that. But I'm Terri Mays. I'm a certified culture engineer with emphasis on helping companies bring out the best in their people.
Well, Terri, we're going to make a little joke out of this because, we're sitting here, you got your video working perfectly. Something's interfering with it. So, look, Terri, you guys hear Terri's voice is perfect. She's in and out. Hopefully she's back fully because it was all working perfectly. But just as we start, wouldn't you know it?
Of course. It's always going to be when you need it the most.
Yeah. So Terri may go in and out. And hey, look, we've got her. She's here. She's bright spirits always. So it's fabulous. So why don't we start, Terri? Maybe I will pull up some info here. I'll share a screen. We'll look at this Chrome tab. We'll share cost of turnover info. Okay, let's go in here. So we're going to start by looking at these direct costs of turnover. So when you look at this slide, you'll see on the bottom, we have this pre-departure period. We have a vacancy period. We have onboarding. And then we have basically them becoming fully effective. And that period for becoming fully effective is going to vary based on the role. This one says a year. I've seen roles where it takes 2 years, and I'm sure there's some that are much longer depending on how complex it is. But there are costs associated with each of these sections, and we're going to talk about them.
And these days, we're seeing a lot of a longer length of time for the search. So it's been depending on some of the roles, with the Great Resignation, we had a lot of people leaving their jobs and changing careers altogether. And so the search itself is now taking longer than it ever has before. So you've got openings that stay out there for 6 months, 8 months. And so that just increases this cost exponentially as you go through this process of selection and then hiring, onboarding. All of these things just take even longer when it takes you even longer to find the person in the first place.
Yeah. And, look, there's the separation process, so let's look at that. There's some expense. You have a vacancy period, pre-departure, where, these people have checked out basically. And they're there. And then the associate leaves. So now we get into some other expenses. And like Terri said, this vacancy period is lengthening. It is harder to find high caliber people who want to come to work in an organization. It's competitive out there. People are more demanding in terms of location and the things they're looking for. So it could be very, very time consuming to get a good, high quality person.
Yes, very much so. And then if you factor in the human side of business, so people that are high IQ, that are great leaders, or even just great employees that are high IQ or high EQ, you really are struggling to make a replacement for that person. You're losing soft skills that aren't easy to find these days.
Oh, yeah. Very, very costly. And let's look just at these hard costs. These are direct costs. Search. Let's say that you are doing a search on your own. You have a HR department. You got to get a job description. You got to post it. You got to go out. You got to put it on all the boards. They're going to get recommendations on resumes. People have to review those. They got to look at candidates. They've got to narrow it down to a set of finalists. They may do some quick online video interviews. Oftentimes today, they're really looking at different types of diagnostics that they're running, assessments for different types of skills proficiency. Those cost money to run. And then you got the whole selection process, which could be very expensive, right? You have a lot of people that may be interviewing depending on the level of the job and the role, many candidates. That takes all the management time. And then you got the actual process of making an offer. Sometimes you have to make multiple offers. You've got to negotiate. You've got to go through the process of actually getting them in. And that's before you've actually hired the person. So this could be very expensive, especially if you're going to pay for a professional search. Now you could be paying, 30% or more of the annual salary to find that person.
Right. And then you get into the onboarding, and
Oh,
training,
man.
which are, both of those activities can span months, years, depending on the particular role, the level of skill that's needed. Like it could take upwards 2 years for some of these roles to be filled properly and for that person to be fully onboarded and trained to be fully self-sufficient. It's a long process. And so it's much cheaper to keep the employees that you have fully engaged than it is to allow them to walk away and then start over.
Yeah. And so you start seeing the cost of turnover being multiples of the salary for that individual, multiples to replace them, get the person up to speed. When you look at onboarding, many companies do just a terrible job at onboarding. It's such an opportunity to get the person welcomed in, get them up to speed quickly. That's their initial impression of your company. And if you don't have a real crisp onboarding process, you're not just wasting human capital and talent, you're creating a very bad impression. You're not introducing that person to all the people they really need to know and work with. You want to formally start building relationships where they matter and not let them have to figure out, who do I need to work with, build those relationships. You want to do this quickly because relationships matter. It's all about the speed of work. Companies do that very poorly. So, these onboarding costs are real, and it's less expensive to onboard them well than improperly, because now the time to acquire all that institutional knowledge and relationships takes just much longer.
Yeah. And you've got a lot of rework. I've got the blah blahs.
Blah blahs, yeah.
You've got a lot of rework. You really end up having a lot of extra burden on people that are doing the training and the onboarding when you don't do it right the first time. So now you've got to go back and do it again, or you've got to spend longer because you're not clear. You don't have good documentation. You don't really know the process and the roles and responsibilities clearly enough. They aren't defined clearly enough for the person. So then you've got to go back and rework some of that material. So it's just a lot of extra overhead and it would have been so much quicker to just do it right the first time.
Yeah. And you look at companies, they have a lot of institutional knowledge. They're systems that are unique to their company, or they have a lot of systems around that maybe they're legacy systems. It is hard to acquire people who know those systems. So training takes place. Oftentimes that training is inadequate. And so people are going through this very cumbersome learning process on their own.
Right.
Oftentimes they
Trial
don't.
by fire.
Yeah, trial by fire, throw them in.
Yeah.
How many times have you been in a company or work with a client where you see people don't even get credentials to these systems quickly that they have to work in? They're waiting for their credentials. I
Right.
remember one company we're working with, it took people months to get a laptop, believe it or not.
Right.
True
I
story.
can believe it.
Months, literally, to get a laptop. And it was some messed up thing with procurement. I don't remember the exact story, but come on, how could that be? And these are very high-end people. It made no sense at all.
Yeah.
But these are all costs. So, you could calculate these. How many hours is it for interviews? What are you paying in fees, whether it's advertising or search fees? You can go through all of this and you could put a dollar value on it. That's what we do. And we'll go over a real example actually in episode 2. So let's look at some of these hidden costs of turnover. So let's look at this pre-departure period, the vacancy, and the onboarding process. And we'll start with pre-departure. So Terri, maybe you want to start there.
Yeah, these are the things that people don't consider. So everybody is kind of well versed in that process that we just walked through with hiring. So the direct costs associated with turnover. But these are the things, the little things behind the scenes that eat up costs exponentially. It's almost like you can have a set of costs that's associated with turnover, and then you factor in all of these hidden costs, and you're almost going to triple or
Yeah.
quadruple the cost of turnover, the true cost of turnover. And we'll look at some of that next week. So you'll see for yourselves. We've got some real good examples to
Yeah.
show you. But, you've got this pre-departure period where that person is disengaged, they lack belonging, there's lost productivity. So things that you think are getting done are not actually getting done. And you don't find that out until the person is gone and somebody else has to pick up their work.
Yeah.
And then you discover, oh, Bob hasn't been doing his work for like 6 months.
What a crapo job Bob did on this. Look at this.
Right,
He's supposed to
right.
get this done. He kept reporting he's on track. And that's a leadership
Exactly.
problem too. You shouldn't be surprised by this stuff. They should have ways of, trust and verify, but we know that doesn't happen in a lot of cases. So,
Right. A lot of times you don't find out until the person is long gone.
yeah.
Depending again on how long it takes you to backfill that position, it may be even longer before you realize that you have a bigger problem than you thought you had. And then you've got that whole negative impact on the team's productivity. So somebody is trying to pick up extra work and continue on with their current job as well as the job that has been vacated. So now you're adding on work to people. People are getting burnt out. They don't really want to be there and do multiple jobs. And so you do a lot of context switching throughout the day, and you end up just making more mistakes because you're trying to go so fast. You're
Yeah.
trying to,
You can't context switch. We
yeah.
know humans aren't good at that. So,
No, it's just not good at all. And
and
then you've got an unproductive backfill.
yeah.
Well, that is just even worse because now you've got somebody that's making mistakes all the time, and they're just really doing a terrible job. And you've got to go
Sucking up
back and
everybody else's time
re-
because they're leeching off everybody's brain. They need to know what to do. They're unproductive or they're dumping work on other people. These folks, I mean, wow, they're well intentioned, but boy, they have a real negative impact on performance and they create more burnout in the company.
right. It's just a vicious cycle. And then again, you've got that rework factor that goes in with this because the person is not productive. So somebody else has to redo it to make it more productive. And then that impacts clients. I've seen situations where we brought in a bad hire and it just destroyed the morale on the team. Our clients were not very happy because we had this person that was just really not up to speed and they were not a good fit. And so every interaction with the client was just a struggle. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
eventually you have to recognize that and make sure that you're pairing people together with that new person so that you can catch that sooner rather than later, because you can destroy credibility by having a bad hire. You have that person or a bad temp, somebody that's temporarily trying to fill in for this position that's open, that they're not really good at the job. They're just trying to do the best that they can. You can destroy credibility for the next person that comes into that role and even for the entire team. People start to question your leadership abilities. They start to question the capabilities of the team.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you have to be very careful in that area.
And when you talk about clients, it's internal and external clients, depending on the role you're in. Sometimes it's a
That's
service
right.
role, you're servicing people internally. Sometimes it's servicing external clients. And so, when you get back to that, this period of disengagement in the beginning when they've decided, hey, this is not the place for me, I'm leaving, the quality of the service, not for everybody. Some people are just, they have a lot of deep sense of accountability and they do a good job to the last minute. But there are plenty of people who don't. And
Right.
that starts to impact clients, internal and external. You look at the negative impact on team productivity, mood, collaboration, relationships. When people know they're leaving, it's painful to leave friends. And people start to, slowly start shedding relationships, getting ready to get out of there because that's human. It makes it easier for them to leave, right? Because they're not as tight anymore as they were. And so humans will start to, shut down relationships slightly in anticipation of the day they're going to say goodbye. It's easier on them emotionally. So their mood also. Mood is contagious. If you've been watching our series and you've looked at belonging or mood or any of these shows we've done, mood is contagious. So these people, their mood is down. And it's often a tell that you can see that these people are actually on their way out the door because their mood has changed, their behavior has changed. Good leaders are tied into that. Teammates often pick it up and say, hey, what's up? Something bothering you? But the mood changes. That mood is contagious. They start bringing the team down. And when you get to the vacancy period, new people coming in who don't fit, same thing. They may be frustrated. They're going to bring the whole team down. So this is a very expensive set of hidden costs. They're soft. They're harder to calculate, but this stuff is real and it's going on. And the cost of lost productivity from vacancies is very high. People don't realize. And a lot of it has to do with this time to competency. Roles with a very long time to competency, turnover is very costly. If you have a short time to competency, very easy to master the material, get up to speed. Hey, those are certainly less costly. Turnover is not as much. If people have a deeply collaborative role, a lot of relationships, those are costly. That's called social capital. It's hard to replace that social capital. And that really has a big impact on how effectively the team works and what the speed of work is of that team. These are all real.
Yes, absolutely. We started talking about the negative impact of the vacancy on clients and the team. And I think we should also mention too about the burnout factor that's happening here with people that are just overworked and they're not getting one bit of extra pay for all of this extra work that they've taken on because it's intended to be kind of temporary. And so people always feel like, there are going to be things outside of my job description that I have to do. I'm kind of prepared for that, but nobody is prepared to do double work, to do the effort of two roles. And so you have to be extremely careful in this space when you do have a vacancy to make sure that you're not overworking and burning out the people that are there, that are the ones that stay behind, that are the high performers, that are the ones that you can count on, because you can overly count on them. That also makes the situation just even tougher. This vacancy that's out there, it just becomes even more difficult to get that person to continue to commit, to continue to work the overtime. People just get tired and they're just like, I'm tapping out. It's not really my job. And it's actually true.
Yeah. And you get leaders with this inability to address the root causes of turnover. Companies with fair amounts of turnover, look, they've got problems. They don't address them. They let it go on. And that creates a lot more stress, tension, and burnout on the part of the people. And burnout is a real big issue across a lot of companies. And, now you see companies laying off people. So you've got other factors leading to burnout in these environments. As people take on more work, other people leave who say, hey, I don't want to be part of this. And it's a really vicious cascade that goes on.
It is. It is. There's, in that last part, you've replaced the person. So you've got a new replacement hired and you start getting into the onboarding process, and there's still more costs that are hidden costs that people don't really think about. This cost of lost clients because they had a relationship with the person that was there before and they like that person and they don't want to work with the new person. They rather stick with the person they had. We'll go through some real life examples, but the first one that comes to mind is, you've got some of these sales positions where people just build this, I'm going to date myself, but they build this Rolodex. Yeah. People don't know what a Rolodex is. Kids, go Google it.
Yeah.
It's a real thing, but you build this network. You have this group of people that you're connected with that want to travel with you because they like the quality of the service that you provide. And so you can lose clients because of that when you lose a person that's very well connected.
Oh yeah, it's big. I mean, that is very, very real. People have relationships. They go to a competitor, they can steal that client away without a doubt.
Yes.
I mean, that's a real world thing that happens. And you look at this lost productivity of helpful coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that are helpful, but when you have a project that's functioning and it's behind, when you add new people onto the project, you don't pick up speed. You fall further behind. For this reason, the new people, they're pretty much an empty shell, and you got to fill that shell with all the institutional knowledge, all the relationships and everything. And that takes time and effort. It takes a lot of people explaining things to that new individual. and they're explaining stuff to the new person, helping them to get up to speed instead of doing their work. So you get further behind, more burnout, more pressure. And so you could see that the hidden costs of turnover are significant. And depending on the environment you're in, these can be bigger than the direct costs, quite honestly. And let's look at some studies here. This was by the ROI Institute. It's quite old. I mean, I think this data has got to be at least 6 years old, but I don't think it's changed that much. You can see the costs of these various jobs and how turnover can be very, very high. Somebody who's working in, software, 200 to 400%. Supervisors, I think it's could be much, much higher than this. And I always thought these were on the low side, quite honestly, based on my experience. But people think, hey, that guy left, the salary is, 125. Well, what could it cost to replace him? We're going to lose less than that. No, you're probably losing a lot more when you do the math. And we will show you a real example, actual live data next week, at least one, maybe two or three, we'll see, of what it costs to lose talent, especially good talent. And there's a cost of a bad hire, and that's involuntary turnover, and there's the cost of voluntary turnover of losing good people. They're both costly for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you look at that skilled hourly worker, so the machinist, technology has kind of infiltrated everywhere. So
Yes.
this whole digital transformation that most companies are going through, I'm in automotive, so I can speak directly about that. But, going to this electrification that we're going to in this direction with electrification, the skilled machinist is going to be incredibly expensive to replace, because it's no longer just working with your hands. You've got to learn how to work with the software. So you've almost got to be bilingual in that case.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to do hardware as well as software, because a lot of these features and functions are enabled by software. It's no longer just a physical piece of hardware that's installed in your vehicle. You've got some hardware that works with some software in order to make it fully alive, that feature fully functional. So to replace some of these folks going forward, it's just going to continue to get more and more expensive.
Time to competency and aptitude. It's not just the fact you got to train them. They have to have the aptitude. And people have different aptitudes for different things. You got to find somebody who's high aptitude to replace a high aptitude person who left. That isn't easy.
No.
It's hard to find high aptitude people in just about anything. And people rely on high aptitude people in roles because they're so good at this stuff. It comes so easily. Great machinists were always hard to find, quite honestly. And you're right there. In this new world, wow. And look at these automated factory floors with the robots, and people have to program them. You got new models coming out. You're reprogramming the robots on the floor. You got floor control systems. These super complicated factories.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, about it.
It's crazy, and it's only going to get worse. So make sure you're spending the time that you need to spend with your employees. Engagement is the way you fight turnover. It's really, you have to make people feel like they belong, that they're connected, that they can put some roots down. That belonging series has been going. It's really been a good lead in to what we're talking about today, because that's how you fight that turnover. That's how you keep people engaged and they want to be there. And that's really what you want, is a person not just there to collect a paycheck, but you want a person that's firing on all cylinders, that's really fully engaged in the work. And so make sure you're taking the time and doing the things and taking the steps to make people feel connected to the organization.
Super important. When you look at our logo up here, we do this as a give back to help educate people. This is free information. It's extremely valuable, but you see talent potential unlocked. You almost can't read it. That's what you want. You want an environment where the full talent potential of people is unlocked, where they put down roots and stay. That's how you avoid all this turnover cost and burning out everybody, because your leaders haven't really led with human-centric leadership style. So please join us next week when we're going to go over actual live episodes of true costs of turnover. We'll have some examples. You could see it. And I think this is really important. It is so valuable to invest in keeping people when you understand the true cost of turnover. People feel it in companies, but oftentimes leaders don't understand. They've never sat down. They've never done the calculations. They've never understood direct and hidden. They don't know how it works. Every leader should understand the true cost of turnover in the area for the different roles that really matter. You have to. I mean, that's the world we're in. You got to know this stuff. This is no longer optional.
That is very true.
It's a business. Make the business case. So look, join us next week. We're here every Wednesday, 3:00 Eastern, another show. So episode 2 on the true cost of turnover. We hope to see you there.
Yes. Bye for now.